Our decisions that we make in design reveal our values every day. They clearly state who we think is a person and who isn't, who matters and who doesn't. And those are really big decisions that we're making. We might not even be aware of it, but that's what we're tasked with as designers. And that's why we need the shared purpose that inclusive design can help us create and foster. Without inclusive design, people are free to just act how they want, which allows exclusionary behavior to flourish. Without an inclusive mindset, teams can't gain alignment. They struggle to set and reach their goals, to communicate, to collaborate. And what happens is rogue actors flourish in these scenarios. And we all know who I'm talking about. We've all met those rogue actors, right? Setting their own rules, leaving the team members disheartened, because there's always the people on the team that are longing for process and accountability. And watch the Beatles documentary when you see how the Beatles fell apart, because they were longing for a process and accountability, and they couldn't get along. So even the geniuses can't get along and fall apart. When teams fail to reach alignment, products and features are built on guesswork in order just to hit the deadline, or because it's on the roadmap, we've got to get it done. And then that rogue in the group might end up happy because they went rogue. So sure, they set and reached their goal. But what about the rest of the team? And what about the end user? Inclusion in its simplest form is the universal desire to belong. It's as true for someone using the digital experience that you create as it is for the people on the team who created it. That's why how we work together matters. It's just as important for those creators. If they don't adhere to principles of inclusion, how will they design and build something in a way that makes them accountable to their end user? Will they design and build what they think is right, or will they do the work to find out what the user needs based on their lived experience? By virtue of participation and belonging, you become accountable to each other. This requires good processes and collaboration. And it's hard. It's really hard. How we work together matters. Work that's fueled by participation and belonging to help us achieve our goals of making great inclusive products. So how do we get there? Part of being accountable to each other means aligning on objectives. And probably everyone here is very familiar with using OKRs, objectives and key results, to measure success. And we use these at a company-wide or maybe team level for quantitative goal measurement. But let's widen the lens a little bit, and let's imagine a world where maybe we start using OKRs and we add something into the mix, actions. So now we have objectives, actions, and key results in our measurement. By simply adding actions into this framework, how we work together becomes just as important as our key result. An example of a potential action could be something like this. Your team might decide, we will consider different perspectives. We will learn from others. What that might look like in practice on a UX research project is that you decide we will intentionally include or involve people from a range of different racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, disabilities, and cultural backgrounds. Now, as a team, we could use that action as a point of alignment throughout a project. We can easily take a pause at any point and look at that action and ask ourselves, are we really doing this? And if we're not, then we're not being accountable to each other, and we're not adhering to our inclusive design practices. Without accountability, without agreed upon actions, without the feeling of responsibility to each other, it's really easy for product teams to make decisions without understanding the exclusionary impact those decisions have on the team. People not having a voice, and the users, their needs not being met. Decisions like these are really bad for team morale. It creates inefficiencies, it stifles innovation, it blows budgets, And ultimately, it's bad for the end user, who's going to end up feeling like some sort of beta tester when they get a less than optimal product, because you had a team who is sad, unhappy, and not working well together creating the product. So we've heard, all the excuses, right? You've been on this team. Well, we don't have time. We just don't know how to do that. It's an edge case. Don't worry about it. Oh, well, this is my favorite. It passed WCAG. We checked the accessibility box, like accessibility is a box you check. No, it's not. Or, oh, it's just an A/B test. It'll be up for a week. But then guess what? Somebody forgot to take it down. So it's still up, floating around out there, haunting you. So the good news is there are ways you can influence outcomes with inclusive design activities that will help you guide your team towards accountability to each other and to your end users. So I'm going to show you an activity to help you make better decisions using the persona spectrum to identify mismatches in an experience. And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with the persona spectrum. It was first developed by Microsoft when Kat Holmes was leading their inclusive design efforts, and it offers a way to think more inclusively about users than typical personas that we would use. So teams can use this to work together to understand related mismatches and motivations across a spectrum of permanent, temporary, and situational scenarios. And what we like about this is it fosters empathy, and it really widens the lens on how a solution scales to a broader audience. So Stacy and I spent a lot of time deepening this into an exercise that brought in the user's full background on their circumstances, their needs, frustrations, mismatches, and looking at the approaches a user might use to create workarounds for the mismatches. So the resulting understanding for the team and the broader discussion this exercise provokes can help the team think about how people are using or can't use, maybe if you've already built it, the product. It can also be a crucial building block for things like journey mapping, concepting, wireframing, anything you need to do to make decisions about your product. So clearly the best time to do this activity is during or before, discovery or define phases of the design process, maybe after you've done some generative research and before you've started on concepting your big idea. But let's imagine that you've just found out your product, you've launched your product, you're getting really bad customer feedback, and you need to rethink things. That's a great time to throw persona spectrum into the mix as well, because maybe it will help you find out those mismatches and help you course correct. So Stacy and I created a beta version of our persona spectrum flashcards, and anyone is welcome to use those. They live under a Creative Commons license. They also appear in Stacy's aforementioned book, WCAG for Designers. I keep giving Stacy a shout out for her book. I should have brought it, and it would be in the swag bags. I wish I thought of that. I'm going to show you how to run the exercise with an example of how our student participants use the flashcards based on a real case study from Realtor.com. And let's take a look at the content that inspired the exercise. So this was a real customer service issue that happened when we were at Realtor.com on the accessibility team. And I'll just quickly go over this. Good morning. I hope this email is the correct contact. I am legally blind with a full-time job. When I work in office, I utilize the bus system in the greater Pittsburgh area daily. I have no other options since I am physically and legally unable to drive. I am currently looking for a new home to purchase with my family. I have not found one single option on Realtor.com to help with my search and finding a home with nearby public transportation options. There are so many filters, including nearby tennis clubs, but not one single option for public transportation. On the commute tab, there is only driving and walking. Why not public transit or even bus stops on the map list? Google Maps has used updated public transit options, so it would not be difficult to add and upkeep transit options on your site. I feel as though your site caters to those with money and not to those of us who truly need a house in a very specific area. I'm not sure how tennis clubs are more important than public transportation. Ouch. I hope you take my concern serious because I am not the only person who would benefit from this option. Whew. So shout out to customer service for sharing this with the design and accessibility team. And Also, shout out to customer service that you should spend as much time as possible with them to actually get to know your customers and to see what's wrong with your products, because they are a gold mine. Don't trust AI. No, AI is good too. But so first card is we look at the user and examine their life stage and lifestyle. And we want to look at, do they have a permanent disability, which would be a lasting and long-term disability that may progress over time, or perhaps a temporary disability that's short-term and may be resolved or resolve on its own, or maybe a situational disability, which is environmental, or a scenario-based one in that moment in time. That would be like me forgetting my readers, so I can't read my notes and talk to all you people. We want to look at things like, what is their living situation? What's their employment status? So we want to get to know them and what's going on in their day-to-day life. So the sticky notes you're seeing on the left, we did this exercise live at our guest lecture with the students. I just didn't have time to have a volunteer here today in the 20 minutes. The next card is looking at motivations and behaviors. We want to know what's going on, what's motivating this behavior. So we might look at, in this situation, after reading that email, what is the motivation for this move? Is their family growing? Did they get a new job? Maybe they got a better job and they're moving to a new, better home. Maybe they were laid off and got a new but not so great job that's forcing this move. Maybe they're trying to downsize. Maybe we did hear something about money, right? There's money concerns. Maybe they want a shorter commute. We really don't know. Next, we look at their circumstances and needs. What's going on right now in their life? What's changed? What could help from our technology? Are there tools and technology that we can provide? Is there an environmental change that could help? You know, here they clearly need their work to sustain themselves and their family, and they have to commute to that job, and they have to find a home in a very specific area. So they have a lot of constraints, and possibly that financial constraint. Next, we think about their frustrations. You know, what's frustrating them and keeping them from moving forward? And, you know, us prioritizing bougie things seems to be very frustrating for this user. You know, they're saying, hey, what about me? I matter too. Bus routes are more important than tennis clubs. And the worst case scenario here is maybe if this move was a positive thing and voluntary, we're suddenly, you know, our brand is all about empowering people and helping people with a move, introducing you to a realtor, someone who cares. Suddenly we're making it seem like, hey, moving is terrible, right? So we're doing a disservice to our user and our brand. And then finally, we think about the mismatches and the approaches or workaround that the customer is taking. And, you know, the major constraint for this person certainly was they had a finite area where they could look for a home. And our students, you know, first came up with some ideas and they said, well, hey, why can't they take an Uber to get to the bus stop? What's the big deal? And then we said, hey, wait a minute, we don't know their financial circumstances. And in fact, the customer called us out for being bougie and making tennis clubs a priority. So maybe that's a kind of a privileged point of view. Let's have a discussion about that. But, you know, could we inadvertently be sending them also to the competition? Maybe the competition is doing a great job with public transportation and they're filtering. We better go over there and look right away. What is Zillow doing? What are these competitors doing? So at the end of the day, what did we learn by using the cards? What did they help the team with? What does this have to do with inclusive design? You can see that these questions sparked a really deep conversation with this team pretty deep, pretty quickly, right? We touched on things like disability, socioeconomic status issues. It checked our own sense of privilege and thinking about, again, who matters. We talked about a long list of topics that typically might not come up at work. These aren't things that you're told not to talk about these things at work, but we are making products and making decisions about who matters every day. And this is a perfect example of that coming to life. So what if in a different world, these conversations with the help of this persona spectrum activity had happened earlier on in discovery? And let's say engineering had been invited into those conversations and accessibility had been brought up. And we looked at the Google Maps, and maybe content design had been invited into the filtering conversation. And we looked at the filters and thought about that. And this happened during discovery. Maybe we could have avoided some of these mismatches that ensued. And it also might have helped this team get to know each other and learn to have difficult conversations in a safe way, because the conversation is sparked by the cards. It's by these conversations that we're having because we're asking these questions about our user. We're not asking each other about our socioeconomic status or our disabilities. We're talking about these people that we're trying to create a service for. And if we're thinking about who matters and why, and having these conversations, it would have been a great opportunity to come up with their OAKRs, right? They could have established what their actions were to determine, as a team, what values were important to them. Maybe it would have made them feel more connected as a team, to feel empowered to influence decisions as they developed their product and shaped their product decisions. Thank you. Any questions?
I think the good news is that this is getting more and more integrated into planning. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's inconsistently moving forward. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think post-pandemic, I worry because I'm seeing things becoming more tactical lately than it used to be. And it might just be the way things are happening now, or because of AI. And I think this is still something that we can do as humans that AI can't do yet. Maybe in 10 years AI can do this, but right now I think this is still what separates us from the machines is our empathy and our ability to get to know each other and understand each other and make these kind of value-based decisions. And I don't think AI can do that yet, even though, like, you know, we have Qualtrics and it has an AI tool and it can go through all of the customer data and feedback and voice of the customer, and then you can go in and you can, you know, kind of ask it questions. But it's not really giving great results yet in terms of stuff that's actionable for UX design. Like, it'll say, a bunch of people complained that, you know, they didn't like the app. It's like, well, what are we going to do with that? You know?
Very specific.
Yeah.
I was curious.
Yeah.
Do we get to know the result, the end result of that customer inquiry?
I don't know, actually. I don't know what happened. I hope we solved their problem.
Nice. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.